afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I am so glad that you all are here. I'm Dr. Sarah Davis, Director of the Family Enterprise Center here at Kennesaw State University. And our work is centered on one simple idea. Family businesses deserve a place where they feel understood. So we provide education, connection, and support for family business leaders at all stages. Whether you're building the business, navigating working with your family, or thinking about what comes next. So today's conversation fits beautifully into that mission, and we're especially excited because it is a collaborative effort. We are very grateful to be hosting today's webinar in partnership with Loyola University Chicago's Family Business Center. I'd like to briefly introduce Jill McCall, who has been a wonderful partner in bringing this conversation together. Jill, I'll turn it over to you for a few words.
Thanks, Sarah. No, I'm excited. This is our first time partnering with you. And so I hope it's the start of many new things. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jill. So one of the questions that Jill and I often hear from families is how do we involve the next generation thoughtfully? So without creating any sort of pressure or entitlement or tension. And so meaningful involvement doesn't start with titles or ownership percentages or formal plans. Instead, it starts with trust, conversations, and shared understanding. And that's what we're going to talk about today in this webinar. So we are thrilled to be joined by Elizabeth Ledoux and Andrea Carpenter of the Transition Strategists. They bring deep experience helping families move from uncertainty into clarity in multi-generational planning, which is a perfect topic for everyone here today. So their work focuses on practical frameworks that help families involve the rising generation early, intentionally, and in ways that build confidence rather than chaos. So Elizabeth and Andrea will walk us through a few tools during this time, and we're so grateful to have them with us today. So Elizabeth, Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Sarah. We're super happy to be here, share with you guys today.
Absolutely. So today, I just want to encourage people to ask questions and be as interactive as you feel comfortable being, because we're here to help and to share and to hopefully give you some new perspective on some tools to create that multi-generational family legacy. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we thought we would start with a little bit of a poll just to understand kind of who's in the room and what the big issues are that you are thinking about. So, Sarah, if we want to go ahead and launch that. There's two questions, and if you don't see the Zoom poll, it should kind of pop up in front. But if you don't see that poll, then you can drop your answers in the chat if you want. So, where do you currently struggle most in engaging your next gen or your rising gen? Is the first question. And the second one is, what is your biggest fear about involving the next gen in your family business or family wealth? Go ahead and end that poll and share those results. So what I saw here, the biggest answer, 40% said managing different levels of capability and interest. So all the kids are different. We also had an answer for each one. So at least one of you also. So how do we start the conversation? How do we actually know what our kids want? How do we actually get them interested? We hear a lot of times, my kids aren't interested in this. How do you balance inclusion without giving up control over your business? How do you keep the family together, manage harmony and tension? And there's even people who haven't started yet. So where do we even start thinking about this? So you're not alone in any of that. And then biggest fear about involving the next gen, the big ones here were the next gen isn't ready. So they're lacking capability or maturity. Again, worry about loss of control. So you don't want to give up too much too soon because it might damage the business and relationships. And the kids don't care or aren't interested in the business. So, all right. With that, Elizabeth, are we ready to start kind of showing about
Yeah,
this?
let's do.
Okay.
Let's do. Yeah, so we're going to take you through a couple of different lenses, and this is just over at least my many years. I've been doing this for about 30 plus years, working with families of wealth, families that have active businesses, trying to help them figure out how to bring in that next generation successfully. And we do have a pretty good record behind that. And so hopefully some of this information that you'll hear is it's information that'll resonate with you. So what we typically see is that families and the owners, wealth creators, wealth managers right now, if you're managing the wealth for your family, you're typically building this next plan or this next strategy in a vacuum. So you've got parents, advisors, and documents all working together with the kids kind of out of the picture. They're down below. You don't know what they want, and they really aren't having any input. So you're making all the decisions, assumptions, all of that protection around that vacuum. And as people do that, they're thinking usually, especially if you have an active business and a family, it's a little bit easier. But most of the time, what people are thinking is the family and the business community are one, that there's no difference between them. And usually the best strategy is to separate those. So you reframe that into the idea of two communities. And it sounds simple, but it's really actually very deep to think through this, because you've got your family community where you've got inclusion, you've got everyone belongs, and you want that. You want your grandkids in, and you want your great grandchildren in, and you want the spouses, of course, because you want that family dynamic. You want the holidays and the generosity and all the fun around that. And there's a lot of education that happens over in that side. But with a family business community, typically, one, the family business community funds the family. And so depending on how many people you have that family business community is supporting, and again, a family business community can be investments in, in any Schwab account or anything like that, all those investments, they fund this family. And over in the family business, you have inclusivity and exclusivity. So you're more selective there, which kind of helps with the idea of, kids being ready. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, about how to approach that. But the exclusivity in the family business community, if you keep it in the family business community, it helps you to not have conflict in the family community, because it's the exclusivity that says, how come I can't do it too? You want to keep that family business community really healthy with the right people leading it. It is the golden goose that keeps laying the golden eggs, right, for the funding of the family. So the family community gives you a lot of fun time together. I'm not going to read all that to you, but the fears are that the family won't stay together, and opening up this family business community conversation could create conflict. And again, we think that conflict comes from a feeling of not being enough, a feeling of being excluded for whatever reason, which can all be managed over in the family business community really well if you separate those. And that's why that matters. I don't know, Andrea, do you have anything to add?
And so I'm a successor. I don't think that Elizabeth and I said this, but I'm actually Elizabeth's successor inside of our business, and I'm a second generation inside of my family. So this idea of knowing like when you have permission to sort of engage in something and when you're kind of excluded from it or it's not your place is actually really helpful and provides a lot of clarity to that next generation to give them some parameters of when and how they can engage. And so a lot of our work and our process is actually how do we invite that next generation in and design what the future looks like together. But you, as the current owner, get to decide if, when, who gets an invitation to come into that family business community and start that conversation, which I think is an important thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. So long time, the transition typically is a journey. It's not an event. It's our belief that if you leave it to be an event, that that's when they usually fail, and they fail hardest. is when it's an event. Making it a journey, there's a lot of good conversation, a lot of fun, a lot of learning, a lot of transfer of knowledge. It really can be a great opportunity.
Yeah. And so we like to start a little bit with kind of the psychology and understanding of like what happens when someone actually goes in and thinks about transitioning a business. So we have this model, we call it the transition paradox. And on one side, we are running the business. So like as an owner or the current operator of the business, you are running the business. At some point, something happens, and now it is time to transition the business. So if this is our business owner, hey, let's start engaging. Let's start talking about transition. You'll start to move towards the other side to transition the business. And typically, when you start to transition a business, especially in family businesses, that's when you start to invite that successor or that next generation in. So they're starting to take over bigger roles, they're starting to have leadership, and they're taking over big pieces of actually running and operating that business. The problem is if that owner decides, hey, I'm not quite ready, something's going wrong, I need to jump back in and run the business. What happens is that owner spins out and they move back over to running the business, and now they're squashing and kind of sitting right on top of that successor. It's not a good feeling for the successor because it feels like you don't trust me. You're not giving me authority. I thought we had agreed on this. We sort of talked about this timeline, and it also feels bad for that owner because they were like, oh, I really was trying to get out. I really want to transition. We're trying to get out of this way. And that's where we can really start to see some conflict start to come. So, Elizabeth, I'll let
And
you talk through this in a little more
yeah,
detail.
yeah, thanks. And just on that prior note, right? Andrea said that so well, but I want everybody to see what happens with the deterioration of trust on both sides of that relationship, right? Both sides of that relationship start to deteriorate their level of trust. And when that happens, it's really hard to build it back. That's the hard part. So you want to try to get ahead of this if you can and
Mhm.
not have that happen. So up at the top, what we start with the paradox is the engagement. So this transitioner, right? They're going to engage, and it's like, okay, I'm going to get started. I'm going to engage in this. And what's one of the first steps is they have to go and they have to learn some stuff. And so you've got your transitioner going, okay, let me go talk to my CPA, my estate person. Let me think about equality and fairness with all the kids and the different levels of education and interest that they may have, because that all falls into equality and fairness. And then the relationship, if I make a move, will I ruin this relationship, or will there be favoritism with that one? And then also financial well-being, their financial well-being and yours, because you want to make sure that if you're the transitioner, you're okay. But you also, on the flip side, don't want to entitle those children, right? You don't want to give them too much. You want them to have to me, which I think is an important point. We see so many families who take such good care of their children that their children actually do not, if something happened in the world where they had to go earn a living, they don't know how to do that. They couldn't survive, they couldn't do it and live a good lifestyle. So their financial well-being is really important here. So what happens is they go, oh, everything's good, I'm learning and I'm navigating, and they're about ready to go into that navigation when, as they start, everything gets really complicated and they start questioning, because as soon as you start to engage with others around you, you do not control them. Whatever you say influences them and impacts them, and how they interpret that is how they're going to react back to you. So we see people starting to navigate, and it gets so complicated that they just decide to spin out. They say, I can't do this anymore. I've got to get out of here. And that's when they go back to running the business because the transition is too complicated, too hard, lots of times because of relationships and emotion.
Mhm.
So, um, jumping back in, the support, the outside support, most people have never done this before. So this outside support helps you get back on track. And it could be a program like ours. It could be a program there are a lot of banks and a lot of other people that are doing different things out there, but some kind of an outside influence that says, no, I can get back on track. Because again, we don't want it to be the event. We don't want you to put it off forever. We want you taking small steps along the way, which is how you lead your family and lead the people around you. So back into navigating positives, you have challenges, dilemmas, and as you keep on rolling around there, typically what happens is then you make progress. And so you move forward into making transitions. And in a minute, we're going to show you a tool because a transition is where someone is leaving something. A succession is where somebody's coming in and taking something on. And if you can imagine a younger person, they're not ready to take over your entire role and transition 100% tomorrow. So the transition happens over time. It's a journey. You go back and engage, you learn some more, you navigate a little bit more, and you keep on going around until ultimately you get to your next adventure, little by little.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So that's why we have those dotted arrows there. You can go multiple ways. And that, again, that idea of multiple things likely transitioning. And as you go through each stage of transition, you learn more and can make new decisions on what is in alignment with you, what belongs on the roadmap, what your timeline should be, because people change, things change. Elizabeth and I started working on our transition. And then after 2 years of infertility, I finally very excitedly got pregnant. And I was like, hey, Elizabeth, what happens if we just pause talking about this succession? Does it align with your timeline? And we decided for us it does. So, and it's even more so with family, just recognizing that things come up and all of that. So that's kind of a place to start. We just wanted to kind of have this idea and share this model with you about this idea of kind of what can happen when you think of an owner and a transitioner. If you have any questions kind of on this model or any thoughts, feel free to come off mute or throw anything in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just keep rolling on through some of the practical tools that we use with families to help them actually engage and learn about what their family wants and how to work through kind of this process of building something. So, okay, David, I see a question from you. Pregnancy is such a great issue where it has to be hard not to blur the line on dynamics. Any thoughts or strategies on this? I don't know if you're in a position to come off mute. I'd love just a little more information on your question.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking when you're going through like a succession plan with a family member, it's so much. I mean, this is just me. Not that this is necessarily other people, but it'd be so much easier to say, yeah, let's hit pause than if I was working with someone who's only a business relationship. Does that make sense? And that's what I mean about the tension of those dynamics and just, kind of the way y'all are working through this. Any thoughts or strategies?
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of times it boils down to, do you care about people? Like, to what level do you care about people? Elizabeth and I are not related to each other, and yet I still felt very respected. And we'll show you a tool in a few minutes called the Objectives Matrix. And that tool is really about like, what is everyone's goal in life? Like, what are we going on this great journey of life for, and what's important to you? And because Elizabeth knew that was so important to me, I felt very honored when I shared that with her, and she was able to respect that for me because it was a deal breaker, right? I was not willing to move forward in the business relationship if I couldn't have that personal thing. And so again, it's a little bit of that distinction at the beginning when we talked about this concept of the family community versus the family business community, and what kind of, because being a family together and being happy for someone who is having a baby, or someone's getting married, or they're going through some type of life thing. And sometimes bad stuff happens too, right? A family member's going through cancer treatments or all these other things that can delay things. You're still going to be a family no matter what, but the business is still a business. And so is there a world where the business can delay its timeline for something that's happening on the family side. That doesn't make the family stuff any smaller, but it gives you space to talk about the trade-offs and implications and decisions of each thing and be really clear about the roles. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Some dad. Well, I think that our process and our thinking is a people first kind of a process. And so I'm just going to share what happened to me and what I've seen happen to others in our world as we go through this. I think people don't like to create a strategy for this kind of a thing because there are so many moving parts that you don't control. And so I think they put that off. And when that happens, um, a good portion of this process is to do some self-exploration and actually understand, like, if I would have waited. So my process was, I did my roadmap using our tools, had one of our guides help me do that so that I wasn't, I had that reflection mirror, which I wanted. And so did that. 2 years later, almost met Andrea. We started talking right away, and working together. And then a year later, she ended up, getting pregnant, which she was super happy about. And we were getting close to kind of doing our deal. And so I had to do a little thinking, but I already knew what my timeline was to get out. I already knew what that was. And, was able, because I knew that, to communicate well, go back to my husband, make sure it was okay with him. Like, because there are a lot of pieces. And on her side, her husband, you end up, whether we were family or not, when you get older children that have spouses and they have children and you have grandchildren, they have a life and they are adults, whether they're family or not. So this affects, one small event like a pregnancy, or one small event like a cancer or a death, or, just turning 65 and saying, I don't want to work anymore. That happens too. Um, all those things affect so many people. So I would just say the people first concept, and also the ability to move from being affected to being able to see the big picture and go, and this is how my mind thinks, how do those puzzle pieces fit together now? Right? How do we need to reshape them? And having a strategy allows you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Is that helpful, David?
Awesome.
No, no, might have lost him.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully that
Okay.
was helpful.
Yeah, perfect. And I saw, Sarah, yours about speaking to the value of having milestones for the transition process. And we actually have slides in a little bit about this concept of a timeline and a roadmap, and kind of the flexibility that gives you when it's a roadmap versus a plan. That's why we don't use the word succession plan. We don't like that. We have transition roadmaps because they're flexible. So we'll definitely answer that
And that
as
was
well.
super helpful, by the way. Sorry, I had trouble with my audio.
No, all good.
That's okay. And
Awesome.
Jill,
Just a
the best.
comment about this engage piece. In our family, there's my brother and I started a business 35 years ago. We each have two sons in the business. We challenged our kids to basically said they got to go do something else for at least 5 years before they're eligible to join the family business. I'm just curious if you think that's a best practice, because we've found it's been helpful, and then they spent years and years just kind of in an entry level position before we ever start thinking about the learning piece of this. That's really not about the family side of that. So I'm just curious if your thoughts about kind of doing something before you join the family business.
So my thoughts, Andrea? I can
Yeah, go
answer
for it.
that.
Go for it.
Yeah. So I have a belief, and so this goes into a family set of values also, because there are families that have all their kids go straight into the business and, work in it, and it becomes very successful. Um, we also have families who have kids that have to go out and learn someplace else. Um, my thought is it's really about how they get external influence outside of the family. So whether they go out and they get that experience independently on their own, or whether there are advisors and other people inside of the family business who are overseeing and, treating them as though they're not family members. I think either works. Personally, my opinion is going external to the family business and not having the family name gives them a picture of what it's really like to be an employee and to be able to navigate that. Because no matter what, if they're in your business and they have your name, they will be treated as though they're a family member. It'll be different. They will be treated as though they're entitled.
Yeah. And my podcast is called Your Next Gen Friend. So I've interviewed 15 next gens who are successors in their family businesses. And I would say the ones that have gone and worked somewhere other than their family business all had really positive things to
Yeah.
say about that experience.
Yeah.
So,
And that goes back, is James, is that correct? Or Jim?
Him
James?
is fine. Yeah.
Jim? Yeah, that
Yeah.
goes back, to the idea of my original idea earlier. I have a foundational belief that your kids need to be able to survive on their own without the business, and it gives them a confidence that when they come into the business and they know they can do that, um, they can take bigger risks. They're not as afraid. They know that they can make it on their own. And women, men, doesn't matter. I still think that that's a great feeling to have as a person.
mhm.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Something that you get, it's a gift you give your kids one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have too many stories of kids who got money or got a company, basically didn't understand it, used it up, and then, their lives are basically completely different and not happy.
Yeah. And
And it was a good gift in the beginning.
yeah. Okay, so before we move on, I wanted to call out, I saw Sarah notice that we use this phrase next adventure, and that's like really important to us because really what's happening in a transition is everyone is going to a next adventure, right? The owner or current owner's current generation is moving on to a next adventure, sometimes beyond the business or in a much smaller role inside the business. But also, your successors are going to a next adventure inside of the business and becoming leaders. So it's really about making sure that the next adventure that everyone is going on is an adventure that they're very excited about and actually an adventure for them. So here are some of the tools that we use. It's called the Transition Compass. And before we jump into the compass, this is Tom Kirk. He was one of our clients, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, and they've now gone through two more transitions. The woman who bought the firm from him, they've now transitioned it again. But he said this to me when we were first talking about it. Everyone wants to talk about how ESOPs and LBOs and private equity and all these deals, right, about things that you can do or how to structure it. But until you answer why, what, who, and when, you're not really ready to talk about the how. So we'll walk through some of these tools in this transition compass and some of the tools that we use to help you answer some of these questions, but you'll very specifically notice that how much, that's the money piece, and the how, that's the technical. Am I going to gift it? Am I going to do, are we going to gift it? Is it going to happen after I pass? Are my kids going to buy it? What happens if some kids want in and some kids don't? We want to make sure we get through all of those other questions before we actually start talking about those technical pieces of how to transition. So, Elizabeth, do you want to talk through the why?
Sure. So we think that the why, it's why it's at the top, that this is your most foundational tool. It's the why is a living document because your why changes over time as your kids grow, as they get their own children, as you get older, as the business transitions, your why, it has a foundation to it, but it also continues to change so that you can see, what's next and what's in that next adventure for each person, whether they're coming in or transitioning out. So what do I really want? And we use this tool, developed this years ago. It took us a while to get it honed in. but it's very powerful. It's also, again, a living document. And so the objectives is, what does everyone actually want? Each person does this, or as a couple, like if you're struggling with, do we bring in spouses or do we not bring in spouses? A child, 50-year-old, 40-year-old, 30-year-old child can do this and represent their family, their spouse, and their children with this one tool. And it's what's important to me as a person, to my spouse, to us as a couple in our relationship. What about their immediate family, their extended family, the business? And what if they have business partners or will? So if they're going to come in and own some of it with you, technically they're a new business partner for you. And so what's it like? What do I want for my partners in that different frame of mind, right? The family community and the business community. What's important for the employees or people that we have working with us? And then what's important to the business itself. So you can add and subtract any of the categories, but this gives a great place to start. And it's, again, a foundation, really cool opportunity for each family member to reflect on what they want, and for you then it gets shared amongst the family members, so you learn really quickly what your children want, and they also, in a reciprocal way, can understand what you're trying to achieve. That's how you can then start to put people first, because we want this business to support the family and not the family to be drug along because the business is built like whatever it's, and this is how the transition's going to work. Going back to the vacuum concept.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have owners who want to start on this type of work solo, just like, really, what do I want for myself? What do I imagine for my employees? What do I kind of imagine that I might want for my kids? And then later we can invite the family in. So there's multiple ways to go about it. Either the whole family comes in and we all do it together, or the owner going through solo work. And either is good. It really depends on your personality and your preference, and how involved you want everyone to be at every step. And that could depend, again, on maturity of your children and how far away you think a transition is. It's really great to do work like this 10 years before you transact, but maybe you don't need to have some of the people involved at different stages, depending on how far away you are. So,
Yeah, which is a really good point. Yeah, if you don't know what you want, this is a great place for you to start exploring for yourself. We hear so many times, it's like, well, I can't start my transition strategy because I don't know what I want. And I'm like, well, come on in and let's help you figure out what you want, because that's a starting point. And until you know that, how are you going to be a good leader for
mhm.
anybody, including yourself?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So the what exactly do you have and or desire to transition? And um, sometimes you think about, a set of assets. Sometimes you're just thinking about the business and not thinking about any of your personal wealth or any of what you have in your estate or any of those things. So we have a tool, it's our what tool, and it walks you through, what things do you have? And by picking apart some of these things, which goes back to the either kids being interested or kids not being ready, um, the concept of one size does not fit all. Um, you know, if you have a variety of different assets and you also have two or three kids, um, like one of my kids would be great with some financial assets, and another one would be great with maybe some more mechanical kind of business assets. So just because you have this set of assets doesn't mean they have to be distributed equally amongst five kids. If that's what you have, you kind of can customize, as long as they understand the why behind it. Why did we do this? And they have some say. So this what matrix helps you to pull it apart, see what you have. And again, this is like 30,000 feet. It's like, oh, what do we have? Good to know.
Mhm. Yeah, I just talked to a third gen. So he's now the new third gen owner of a shirt company out of New Jersey. And he actually, when they were talking through like what are the assets, there was some contention with siblings around like, well, you're going to have this business. So he ended up agreeing to get written out of the estate plan for the other assets that his parents had. And so again, really it's what everyone in the family perceives as fair or equal. Another example kind of in this one, this, and it's all anonymized, but this business, they had an LLC that owned the office space and the office building. So the parents in this transition wanted to keep the office building because that cash flow was going to help support their retirement, but it was some of the other business assets that were transitioning. And so just writing it down in a way like this can help you start to see things and get a little bit more creative about how you would actually structure some of that.
So this is the who. Who do I want or who might be interested in quote unquote taking over whatever the asset is? And then who do you need or want to take care of? Sometimes owners will have a person that's worked with them inside of the business, not family, 20 years, taking them through thick and thin. And they want to make sure that that person is taken care of also in this transition. Like they're worried that their child is going to fire them or that kind of thing. So, how do you navigate those things that are going to hold you back? What are those sitting there? So, in this one, you get to look at the who and kind of what you already know the why from them, hopefully, or you have some ideas. And to get to look at your who. Who do you have that you want to take care of? Who do you have that are resources to take over? And start to understand if they're even interested or how far away are they from being ready in your mind? Because in their mind, they might be like, how come I don't already have this, right? You should trust me. But in your mind, you might be like, not quite, not yet.
Mm-hmm.
So where are they at and how do you understand and reflect on that?
Yeah. Awesome. And then the when, this one is one of my favorites. We call this one the many wins. So when is it going to happen? And there's a couple of different categories that you can look at with the when around role transfers, strategic decisions, like board of directors level, and then also the equity. So we need to separate like when is the equity going to transfer from when are leadership decisions going to happen. And there's like a lot of questions that can come up in the when. Like, when do we need to have a more formal board of directors? When are you going to give up your role? So here's just a little visual kind of look at that. Like, when are the roles? And if there are roles that you as the owner love doing, why would you give that up first? Unless it's something that is like a critical, something that your successor needs to learn. Let's give up the stuff that you don't like doing or that's draining your energy anyways. And you can start to put some timing around that. And again, it's to make it a little less overwhelming for you and also your successor, that it's not okay. And now tomorrow I'm going to learn about how all the operations work and also the finance. And I'm going to take over the accounting and I'm going to take over running payroll. Like, it's a lot of steps that someone stepping into ownership might have to take over. So you can break them up a little bit smaller.
Yeah, and I just want to say on the many wins, the idea is to create a vision so that you can start to communicate and invite people into your conversation and your thinking. So gain some clarity for yourself and start to invite them in. These are not promises. There are no promises here because you don't, I mean, truly, you don't know if you're going to be on this planet next week. So this is intention on paper. There shouldn't be any anxiety here. And that communication says, hey, let's start to play with some ideas and see how it goes and see what we run into and see if we have a detour, see if, like with Andrea and I, we had our wins, we had a pretty good strategy. And then, wow, now we have a little over a 1-year-old who's on our meetings sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
which is super fun. So this is not a promise.
Yeah. Cool. So then once you get through those 4 W's, then you can move into the how much and the how. So the how is really about how much is enough for you, for your family. What do you need to live? What can your successor afford? If you're not doing a gifting strategy, can your successors actually afford to purchase that business? So there's a couple of questions that we wrote down here. And let me zoom in. That kind of got a little bit small. So when you think about like what is the business and what will the business or the assets actually produce over time? So think of growth, income, longevity of the source, predictability, and risk. What is your number as you think about sort of coming to the end of your life, and also that successor when they think about their lifestyle, career runway, how long they want to work. Another thing that we see quite frequently is some of the owners are hitting 75, close to 80, and their successors are already in their 50s, and they don't imagine or see themselves working as long. So their runways are actually a little bit shorter, and that impacts some of that as well. Elizabeth, I don't know if there's any others of those that you want to touch on.
Um, I guess the only thing, going back to the idea of being entitled, some families, like Jim, your family, your kids working outside of the business to start and then coming in, some families will decide that they don't want to gift all of it, or they have to have a purchase, like one kid purchases to balance the estate, for instance. And you just want to make sure that uh, lots of times one good practice is that you're not the bank, right? That they actually have to go out, and there's some strategies, even if they don't have money, to maybe get them going, and then they get enough to go out and get a bank loan towards the end. And so I'm trying to give you some of the timeline things. Just because it's not possible today doesn't mean there isn't a strategy to make it possible in the future if you're intentionally have some of those steps.
Mm-hmm.
So on the how much, right? Because there are a lot of things to consider here when there's gifting, equality, fairness, and we have some kids who are interested and some kids who aren't.
Yeah. So then
That's an
that takes
issue we've
us.
been talking about a bunch, and my brother and I both have kids in the business and kids that are not in the business. So our strategy is that there would be some amount of the business that everyone would get as an heir, and then the kids that are in the business would have a chance to earn some additional ownership, but based on, their performance. So they're not in a position to buy it. We're going to give it to the next generation. But this thought of trying to create this equity, it's not all the same, but the kids that are in it are making a meaningful contribution. So anyways, that seems to resonate with us. We're trying to figure out what's the right relationship between what everybody gets and what the kids that are in the business could have a chance to earn. So I don't any thoughts or comments about that would be appreciated, because it's not clear
Yeah.
at all how to kind of what's the right balance of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because that goes all the way back to family values. So, you know, rewarding kids. So the kids who work in the business and the kids who take over they actually have a big burden too, because if the other kids are owners but inactive, then they have this burden of having to make sure the business is healthy and produces something for those other children's interest, right? Just like Microsoft or any other public company would. So there's a lot of pressure in being the ones who stay in. Um, it's interesting. Yeah. Do you gift equally, and then do your kids who want more have the opportunity to buy it from the others? Or is it easier to just gift all the way across the board, and then maybe use um, there's some different strategies. So we aren't tax people, attorneys, or anything like that. We don't do any M&A work. We don't make our money any other way than helping people figure out their roadmap forward. And is there a tax strategy in there, which there could be with a variety of different things, but is there a tax strategy to somehow maybe gift it to those kids who are operating, but not make it an outright gift where you're in equal with your children, right? Because you're rewarding them being there. That's good. But how does that play out with the rest of them? And is there a better tax strategy? I don't know.
Mhm.
I didn't answer your question, but that is a tough one to try to figure out the right balance. And is there does the CEO of the company, if they're working in the business, get more than maybe the head of marketing? That's a real client that we have right now. They're trying to figure out, right? Does the CEO, because he, in this instance, has more responsibility, but also has a bigger paycheck, a much bigger paycheck for his role. So are you paying market value, and then they get the interest on top of their market value, or, and is that fair and equal, or is it not?
Mhm.
So I'll just pose some of those questions because it's a big conversation.
Yeah. Well, we're wrestling with that now. So I kind of envision that the kids that are having the greatest impact on the business and creating the greatest value would probably get more than the ones that didn't. So it wouldn't be equal.
Mhm.
But we're early on in that stage too, where the
Yeah.
second generation is actually now running the business, but my brother and I are still involved. So we're wrestling with that kind of stuff. And there's some of the assets we have are the actual business, and then there's the real estate, which is more of a passive investment. So we're playing around with kind of maybe more ownership for the passive kids in the real estate because it's a passive investment, and the kids that are in the business would have more of the active
Mhm.
shares of the business that they're running. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's
That
complicated.
sounds pretty, that sounds smart. And then I would just go back to the thought of the vacuum concept and think about how you could potentially bring in those children so that they're the ones that are going to end up being business partners in the future, helping them to learn how to work together today and make some of those decisions. You still get you still have the veto card. You get to do whatever you want, but starting them working together with those conversations. How do they have them? What are their ideas? Those all contribute to making your life better and easier, and then ultimately to make theirs a lot better in the future, because as soon as you're gone, the gloves come off at times
Uh,
because you keep the gloves on, and they never learn how to deal with each other, and they
That was
yeah,
never
almost what
say
I
what. Yeah.
that was
yeah,
almost what I was going to say, Elizabeth. I would be shocked if your next generation didn't have some thoughts and ideas on what fairness and equality looks like as well. If they have good relationships with each other, knowing that some are in the business and some are not in the business, people tend to be pretty level-headed. And also when they get to participate in designing what the future looks like, it's much easier for everyone to kind of move forward. So,
yeah, we totally agree. We've had a family council in place now for a couple of years. So the cousins, there's 9 of them plus their spouses. So that we've had a couple of gatherings as a family and a family council, and there's a foundation. So we
yeah,
got a fair amount of the G2 involved in the business at some regard, either working in the business, in the foundation, or the family council. So there's a
yeah.
fair amount of interaction.
Nice.
So
That's
we're
great.
That's good.
trying to
Yeah,
do some of those kinds of things to help facilitate that. But
Good for you.
perfect. Yeah. All right, I'm going to make sure we can show you these few remaining tools. So the last question on that compass is the how. So this is where you actually get into how are we going to structure it? Are you going to exit while you're alive? Are you transitioning it to someone inside the family? Are you gifting it? Are you selling it? Is it a mixture of both? Again, when you start to think about percentages and what each person is getting, this can get really detailed depending on the number of people in your family and how the structures are going to get. But we want to answer all of those other questions before we get to how are we actually going to structure this deal. And for
Right.
the sake of like how this like turns and to like bring it back, how do you actually evaluate like those structures against the things that everyone said was important to them? So their why. And this is one of my favorite tools. So you can take that objectives matrix that we shared at the beginning and actually look at each person's objective and then look at all the different options that you're considering. So we give the kids who are working in the business a bigger percentage. We give everyone equal percentages. We just go and sell to the third party, and you can actually color code each of them, looking at every single person's objectives in the entire family to see if there is an option under consideration that seems to work for most people. There's almost never an option that gives everyone every single thing that they want. There's always trade-offs, but it can help you start to identify and narrow in on some options that feel really good to the family. So,
Yeah. And have conversations about if two people want, in this process, you can see on paper before they happen where the conflict is, where the difference of opinion is, and you can see who will get their what we call deal breakers and who might not get theirs. And so then you can have a conversation and say, hey, are you willing to give this up to get this? And so then there's a trade-off, right? And you can give people gifts
Mhm.
instead of feeling like you were robbed of something. So this helps with communication as you start to pick a path that's going to be best for the family and best for the business. Because remember, we've got that business community. This business, we want it to stay healthy.
Mhm.
So this helps with that communication on some of the conflict.
Yeah. And James, I see your comment that you would favor equal treatment on the original gift, but then still that you would have an opportunity to buy out. Again, every family is so different, and everyone's wishes and their relationships with their siblings, how involved. There are some families we work with. Some of the siblings are like, I don't want any of this at all. Please write me out completely. I don't even want to be a passive owner. So again, it really depends on the people and what everyone says is important to them, and then you can design kind of the structure for transition around your family, since every family and all the people in it are extremely unique.
Yeah, and just one last comment on that. When you design this roadmap forward, um, if you want a multi-generational kind of a strategy, putting in governance and things like that today that you want to last for 2 or 3 generations into the future, it's so important to leave people an exit ramp. How do I get out of here if because how can I leave and make it fair to me and fair to them instead of keeping somebody stuck um, just because they're a family member? So always have an off ramp.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I do have a timeline, a sample timeline to show you. But before we do that, I thought I would just throw this up on the screen, and I'll also put the links in just because I know we're going to run right up on time. All of those tools that we just shared about the compass, the roadmap, the timeline, Elizabeth wrote this book called It's a Journey, and we have lots of extra detail about each of those tools inside of this book. So wanted to offer you a free copy of that ebook, or you can get it on Amazon if you're interested in learning more. So I just wanted to make sure we were able to offer that in case we start to get close to running out of time. So, okay, Elizabeth, I thought we could just quickly talk about this family that we helped that had 7 people in the family, and kind of what came up for them.
Yeah. So this is a family where they did not require kids to work outside of the business. They have 7 children, a mom and a dad, so 9 people. And all 7 of them are working in the business. Some are working more than others. All are basically either getting paid market rate or well over market rate for the work that they're providing. And this is one of those where it's basically a construction company. Um, they didn't have a shared vision. And so bringing those kids in, the mother wanted the father out. The father, he goes to the office at 5 a.m. every day. He's the first one there and the last one to leave. So he's still highly engaged. And because of the way he was helping his children, he had some skeletons in the closet that he did not want them to know about. And it was really funny walking into this because they actually, since they were such a close family, all the kids knew already. It's just the dad didn't know that the children already knew what was going on. Um, but a fear that, yeah, no kidding, Jill, a fear that if he were to lose control of the money and lose control of his CEO role, that his new successor son would come in and basically fire some of his children for, lack of performance, basically. So worked all the way through all of that. We have a great program. They are open, they're communicating, the kids are learning to work together, there's governance going into place. And they're a pretty happy family. Even the mother thinks that she's going to have a husband who's going to travel with her a little bit, which will be amazing. But
Mhm.
it all turned out to be, it, like in this example and others, it turns out to be, what's behind your fear of not talking about whatever it is. And if you were able to communicate it well, and the reasons why behind, some of your decisions, then usually it's about communication and trying to understand what everybody wants, and then coming up with a great solution.
Yeah. Awesome. We were hopeful that sharing a couple real stories about families would help kind of see some families need more, but at the end of the day, it boils down to sometimes people ask, like, what industry do you work in? Or is there a specific type of thing? And I'm like, people are people, families are families. And that's like the business that we are in, is how do you put the people first, if you care about them. So the last thing is, like, you come up with the compass and now you need to actually like gain traction. Like, how are you going to actually put this thing into practice? And so this is where the transition roadmap comes into play. And the timeline is a big piece of that. And when you think of the timeline, there's a couple big pieces here. What are those big key milestones? And you look at them through a couple different lenses for yourself, for the business, for each successor. Each successor can actually have their own timeline on what's going on. You can set target time spans for different things. You can set different roles. So again, this is what it starts to look like in some of our tools. What are those transaction events? So again, that's the equity. What are the people transitions, and what's actually happening in the business itself? So this is a sample timeline. If you look here up at the top, we have, this is our equity transfer. So if the current owners have 100%, when are some of those equity transfers happening, and in what percentages are they? And then what is happening? So if these are the owners, Steve and Jennifer, what's on their timeline? Are they defining certain roles? Are they hiring people? Are they making invitations for successors to come in? For the successors themselves, what is their timeline? When are they deciding if they're going to come in or not? You'll also see role things start to come in here. So I anticipate taking over the financial pieces by Q3 of 2027. So you can look at all of that type of stuff. And then as well as the business itself. So when is strategic planning happening? When are board meetings happening, and activities within the business? So this just helps. I think it's a great communication tool for every single person in the family to know what's going on and what's expected of them. And also to share, hey, that feels a little uncomfortable to me. Can we shift this? What does that look like? So Elizabeth, anything to add?
Well, the only thing, just to wrap up, the only thing I would leave on this one is this timeline, we've built them out for 15 years. So this can be a short, of course, it's more clear in the short term, but a 15-year, where are we headed kind of a thing. Usually 5 to 10 years is about norm. And then the second thing is people live up to their commitments, not your expectations. So here again, they say, yes, I will take over and learn how to do all of the accounting by the end of the year. These are the 4 things I've got to do. Is that right, Dad?
Mhm.
Is that right, Mom? Or is that right? And then it's like, yeah, okay, all right, we're in agreement. Okay, what do I have to do it? And you can put them into education or whatever. They can take classes, but they're committed to doing it and know that they're on the right road. And going back to the idea of achievement, when your kids know how to do something and they've achieved it and they've done that on plan in your eyes, it's exciting. It's a positive instead of a negative of they didn't live up to what you expected and they didn't even know what that was.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
kind of fun. We like this as a fun journey, not as a miserable time when when you might lose your family.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, just for closing thoughts, I think when you think of this idea of running the business versus transitioning the business, and all these different points where you can spin out. Really, the tools that we shared today can help you reduce that chance of spinning out and stay on track. Really, we believe there's no time too soon to start thinking about this, especially when you're thinking about family and successors and them knowing their path and knowing that you're all kind of walking in the same direction. I love the analogy of the roadmap. Elizabeth talks about a trip where she was going to California, and we live in Colorado, so I-70, the mountains, big snowstorm, right? But it's like, okay, I know I'm going to California. I'm just going to go south through Arizona instead. So sometimes we take detours. Sometimes things don't work out exactly the same way, but if we know the direction, we're at least moving towards the West Coast, then we can all start moving and step together and get us there. So, Elizabeth, do you have anything else to add?
No, just a big thank you. I just put in the chat. This is so important. And so I'm just very, very grateful and appreciative that we were all here today and hope that this is helpful to you as you move forward.
Yeah. And I
Thank
I
you.
have a couple minutes, so happy to stay for any other questions.
I found this to be incredibly insightful, Elizabeth and Andrea. So thank you so much. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
Appreciate you just sharing all of your insights and offering very specifics for us to take with us today. Also like to thank Jill and her team at the Loyola University Chicago's Family Business Center for helping us to bring this along. If you enjoyed this webinar and would like to join us for our next one, we're going to be talking about mental health in the workplace. Specifically, we'll have the perspectives of HR, legal, and therapy. So it'll be a very hefty conversation you'll get a lot of value from. And also, I'd like to thank you all just for taking time out of your day to be here with us and work on yourself and your business. Please remember that this is where family businesses belong.